Was Edward III truly a king, or just a magnificent, terrifying showman? Did Gaveston's downfall spell the end of royal excess, or merely mark the beginning of a far more dangerous game? And what secrets lay hidden beneath the Emerald Hills of Ireland, waiting to swallow a powerful earl whole? Let's start with the obvious: Roger Mortimer. A name whispered in court circles, a shadow in the halls of power, a man who seemed to exist just outside the rules, perpetually on the edge of disaster. He wasn't born to greatness, he clawed his way into it, a Welshman with a shrewd mind, a ruthless streak, and a wife who, quite frankly, was a force of nature. Joan, the Irish heiress, wasn't a delicate flower. She was a warrior, a survivor, and a woman who understood that power was rarely given, it was seized. And she was utterly, terrifyingly loyal to her husband. 1308, the air in London crackled with tension. Edward the young king was obsessed with Gaveston, a flamboyant, extravagant Jew, as Mortimer darkly called him, who'd somehow managed to worm his way into the royal heart. It wasn't a matter of love, it was a matter of control. Gaveston was a brilliant strategist, a skilled diplomat, and crucially, utterly devoted to Edward. He was a whirlwind of silks and jewels, of feasts and foreign intrigue, and he was infuriating the barons. The whispers started subtly, a raised eyebrow, a pointed glance, then escalated into open defiance. The earls, those ancient, powerful families who'd ruled England for centuries, were furious. They saw Gaveston as a parasite, draining the kingdom dry. Mortimer, a man who'd spent his life navigating the treacherous currents of Welsh politics, understood this perfectly. He'd seen ambition devour men, loyalty betrayed, and kingdoms crumble. He'd learned to be patient, to observe, to wait for the opportune moments, and he waited. He watched as the barons plotted, as the whispers grew louder, as Edward, blinded by his infatuation, doubled down on his support for Gaveston. It was a dangerous game, a tightrope walk over a chasm of rebellion. The first exile was a formality, a theatrical gesture designed to appease the barons, but Mortimer knew it was a temporary fix. Gaveston was resilient, charming, and utterly impervious to criticism. He'd simply return, bolstered by Edward's affection, and the cycle would begin again. This time, however, Mortimer wasn't going to let it. He wasn't going to be a passive observer. He was going to force Edward to act. The demand to dismiss a Lancaster retainer, a seemingly minor act of defiance, was the spark. It wasn't about the retainer himself, it was about the principle. It was about challenging Edward's authority, about asserting that even a king was subject to the law. The Earl of Lancaster, a man of immense wealth and power, wasn't going to take that lying down. The stage was set, February 1310. The air in Westminster Palace was thick with suspicion and resentment. The Earls Lancaster, Hereford, Warwick, Oxford, and Arundel were united in their fury. They presented a united front, demanding Mortimer's banishment. Edward predictably tried to stall, to manipulate, to buy time. He appointed loyal retainers, men like the ruthless Sir John of Luton, to guard vital castles, a pathetic attempt to bolster his defenses, but it was a losing battle. The Lords Ordainers, a committee of 21 powerful men, were formed, a desperate attempt to rein in the king's excesses. They drafted a series of articles limiting royal power, a symbolic gesture that infuriated Edward. Elusive political maneuvering, one chronicler wrote, that's exactly what Edward was doing. He was a master of deception, of shifting alliances, of playing one faction against another. He announced a campaign to Scotland, a grand gesture designed to distract the barons and consolidate his power. He declared his intention to move the government to York, a move that would shift the balance of power away from London and towards the north. It was a calculated gamble, a desperate attempt to regain control. June 18, 1311. The writ arrived, summoning Mortimer to Berwick, a strategic border town, to muster his forces against the Scots. Simultaneously, a second writ demanded he raise troops from his Welsh lands, but Mortimer had other plans. He'd secured permission from Edward to go to Ireland, a move that was both strategic and personal. Ireland was a prize, a vast, wild territory ripe for exploitation. It was a place where he could establish his own power base, away from the prying eyes of the English court. He returned to Wigmore, a sprawling estate in Herefordshire, and began to organize his expedition. He summoned his lawyers William de Forton, John de Stratfield, Hugh de Croft, and a host of other men, meticulously documenting his appointments, a testament to his careful planning and his determination to protect his interests. And he brought his wife, Joan, with him. It seemed bizarre at the time, a military commander taking his wife on a campaign to a war zone, but Joan wasn't just a decorative accessory. She was a vital asset, an Irish heiress with her own claim to land and influence. Ireland in 1310 was a brutal, chaotic place. The previous year, John FitzThomas had waged war against Mortimer's vassals, the de Lacys, resulting in a massacre. The native Irish, led by figures like Geoffrey O'Farrell, had launched raids deep into English territory, burning villages, stealing livestock, and sowing chaos. The English exchequer had collapsed, leaving the absentee lords vulnerable to attack. And there was the lingering threat of Gaelic law, a system of inheritance that could strip Mortimer of his lands if he didn't fight to maintain his claim. Landing in Meath, Mortimer found a land in turmoil. The O'Farrell clan, a powerful Irish family, had launched a devastating raid, killing Hugh mac Moilissa and Geoffrey mac Mordog. It wasn't just a rebellion, it was a systematic attempt to undermine English authority, to reimpose Gaelic law and customs. The next year was a whirlwind of battles, negotiations, and betrayals. Mortimer was stationed at Trim Castle, a formidable fortress that served as his base of operations. He crushed rebellions, enforced his authority, and consolidated his control over the region. But he wasn't just fighting battles, he was playing a dangerous game of political intrigue. Meanwhile, back in England, Edward was struggling to maintain control. The campaign in Scotland had been a disaster, a humiliating defeat that exposed the king's military incompetence. The barons, emboldened by their success, pressed for further reforms. They presented Edward with the Ordinances, a series of laws designed to limit his power and restore the balance of authority. The Ordinances were a bombshell. They included 6 general statements about the rights of the Church, the keeping of the king's peace, and the principles of Magna Carta. Then came the new Articles, a ruthless attempt to strip Edward of his privileges. The 20th Ordinance was the most damning. It demanded that Gaveston be banished within a month. Edward tried to negotiate, to compromise, to avoid a confrontation, but the Lords Ordainers were unwavering. They saw Gaveston as a threat to the entire kingdom, a symbol of royal excess and corruption. They refused to yield. Gaveston's departure was a Pyrrhic victory. It didn't end the conflict, it merely postponed it. Edward, desperate to regain control, announced a campaign to Scotland and a move to York, attempting to distract the barons and consolidate his power. But it was too little, too late. The Earl of Pembroke, Roger's cousin, had already broken with Edward, siding with the other earls in their opposition to Gaveston. Pembroke's defection was a fatal blow to Edward's authority. It signaled that the king's support was crumbling, that the barons were united in their determination to curb his power. As Edward prepared to leave for Ireland, he realized that he was losing control. He was a prisoner of his own ambition, trapped in a web of his own making. Back in Ireland, Mortimer faced a new set of challenges. The de Verdon brothers, fueled by resentment and ambition, launched a rebellion against him. They ravaged the countryside, attacking English settlements and disrupting trade. Mortimer responded with brutal force, crushing the rebellion and restoring order. But the conflict wasn't just about military strategy, it was about political alliances. The Earl of Lancaster, a volatile and unpredictable man, saw an opportunity to undermine Mortimer's authority. He secretly supported the de Verdon rebellion, hoping to weaken Mortimer and advance his own ambitions. The situation in Wales was equally complex. Lord Mortimer of Chirk, the powerful justiciar of Wales, was a man of ruthless efficiency, a master of political maneuvering. He had effectively become a surrogate prince, ruling Wales with an iron fist. He controlled the castles, appointed the officials, and collected the taxes. He was a formidable opponent, a man who wouldn't tolerate any challenge to his authority. As Mortimer consolidated his power in Ireland, the Earl of Lancaster was plotting his revenge. He saw Mortimer as a rival, a threat to his own ambitions. He began to subtly undermine Mortimer's authority, spreading rumors, forging alliances, and manipulating events to his advantage. The final confrontation was inevitable. It began with a dispute over the inheritance of Welshman, a strategically important lordship. The Earl of Lancaster, with the support of the Earl of Arundel, challenged Mortimer's claim to the lordship, accusing him of violating Welsh law. The resulting conflict was brutal and devastating. It engulfed the entire country, pitting Mortimer against Lancaster and their respective supporters. It was a clash of ambition, of power, and of loyalty. In the end, Mortimer was defeated. He was captured and executed, his legacy tarnished by betrayal and violence. Lancaster, meanwhile, continued to play the game, maneuvering and scheming, always seeking to expand his power and influence. And what of Joan, Roger's wife? She remained by his side throughout the entire ordeal, a silent witness to the unfolding drama. She was an Irish heiress, a vital asset in Mortimer's scheme to secure his inheritance. She was also a formidable woman, a survivor who had faced hardship and adversity throughout her life. As Mortimer's star began to fade, Joan's role became increasingly important. She was the heir to Meath, a valuable territory that could have been used to secure Mortimer's position. She was also a skilled negotiator, a shrewd diplomat, and a woman who understood the importance of maintaining alliances. The story of Roger Mortimer is a cautionary tale, a story of ambition, betrayal, and ultimately downfall. It's a reminder that even the most powerful men are vulnerable to the machinations of their enemies. It's a story of Ireland, a land of beauty and brutality, where power was constantly contested and where loyalty was a rare and precious commodity. But perhaps the most enduring question is this: was Edward III truly a king, or just a magnificent, terrifying showman? Did Gaveston's downfall spell the end of royal excess, or merely mark the beginning of a far more dangerous game? And what secrets lay hidden beneath the emerald hills of Ireland, waiting to swallow a powerful earl whole? And finally, if you could travel back in time and give one piece of advice to Roger Mortimer, what would it be?